This one feels big. It feels really big. And I want to share a story with you from a client. And firstly, I want to say that the amount of trauma that I am dealing with that is related to the state of the world at the moment and this prevalent virus that is permeating our consciousness socially, culturally, biologically, in every way, emotionally, relationally, the trauma that I am working with in individuals because they cannot see their families. They have been restricted. They have been ostracized. They are massively confused. They do not have access to clean and clear information. They are struggling to understand what is happening, and it is stimulating old suppressed traumas of abandonment, traumas of suppression of one's voice, invasion of one's privacy, invasion of one's body. There is so much pain that is being dug up right now. And I'm not saying that's good or that's bad. It's definitely something, and it's definitely intense. And that doesn't make it wrong, but I know we can do so much more. We can do so much better. Let me share a story with you that has been very heavy on my heart for the last 24 hours since inception of this story. Now, this client was sharing from a really elevated place because this individual had just gotten out of 14 days of quarantine. Side note, I find it interesting the language that we are using. Social distancing, masks, lockdown, quarantine. I find the language interesting. I want to also caveat this video by saying this. I'm not interested in conspiracy theories. I'm interested in what is unraveling in the world and how that is affecting us collectively and individually, qualitatively and quantitatively. That's what I'm interested in. And the effects of what we are doing and how we are creating a reality for ourselves, the possible effects down the track, into the future. So this lady takes her family to Europe to visit her family. I believe she has origins there. And she's sharing this story. However, she lives in New Zealand. And now she knew the associated conditions with coming back, entering the country of New Zealand. But she wanted to visit her family and she wanted her children to see their extended family as well. It's a choice that she made and she very much owns that. She comes back into the country of New Zealand and the government quarantines her for 14 days. One piece of information I didn't have was if it was at her expense or not. Not super relevant right now anyway. I know that Australia is one of the countries that is making it at your expense, and it is 14 days. I'm not completely sure because there's so much competing information out there in the World Wide Web from experts, from different arenas and different camps, that the information can be confusing. But my understanding is that 14 days, there's no real science behind that level of isolation, quarantine, imprisonment, whatever you want to call it. So she's in a small room, as she described it. I don't know what the actual measurement of a small room is. I wouldn't think it's a penthouse suite at the Bellagio, but it's a small room. Call it 20 square meters, 15 square meters, maybe 10 square meters, something along those lines, 12 square meters, I don't know. With two other children in a small room. They meaning the individuals. I'm not sure if it's a corporation that is contracting on behalf of the government, but either way, a group of people that are in control of that facility or that area may or may not allow you 30 minutes of walking outside of your room per day, and if they let you outside of your room, you are to wear a mask whilst you're quarantining and you're getting tested. So generally, if you're wearing a mask, it's for the safety of others, because we know that a viral load can penetrate the mask. And so it's more if you're unwell, you would wear a mask so you're not projecting the virus further, so to speak. These are military individuals with weapons, pistols and rifles. Interesting. The way she described it was they would stare at you, and there was an incident before they let her out for one of her 30-minute maximum walks, and there was a congregation of guards, and they referred to her by her room number, 21004 and 38992, whatever her room number was, and that's how she would respond, wearing a mask and with numbers. Not her name. We don't want to humanize her. We want to dehumanize her and add a set of digits as the representation of who she is in the world, her identity. That's really the essence of the story. She was very grateful to come out and, in her words, to be free and experience freedom. She was smiling. She was just sharing the story from what appeared to be a fairly neutral place. And as she was sharing that story, and she had some questions after that as well, but she was sharing that story, I was really thinking about the state of affairs that we find ourselves in. I don't know exactly what's going on in the world. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a molecular biologist, I'm not a virologist. I'm adept at research to the point that I can be. I have a master's degree, I've written theses before, I know how to study, I know how to research information. And I would like to think I'm an independent thinker to the best that I can be. Of course, we all carry unconscious and conscious inherent biases. And something's just not adding up. Not sure if that's how we protect ourselves. Now, protection infers danger. Protection infers that something is quote unquote wrong, that we are unsafe. That is a loaded statement and word in and of itself as well. We can experience feelings of unsafety in many different ways. Spiritually unsafe, emotionally unsafe, relationally unsafe, psychologically unsafe, socially unsafe, physically unsafe, which perhaps can be the largest immediate threat that we experience to our nervous system. We are isolating ourselves. We are causing further dysregulation in our bodies. Another client on that same group call experienced deep sorrow and deep anger and rage for almost potentially being forced by the Australian government to, when she leaves the country, she must have a vaccine of sorts. And all she wants to do is see her father. But she also wants to respect her choices of what she places into her body. You know, that sovereign choice that we have, that apparent freedom that we have. And the question I have is, are we, as a collective, are we handling this difficulty, this challenge that we are facing as a global unit? Are we dealing with this in the most proficient way? Are we thinking about the needs of others? Are we thinking about the emotions of others? Now, bear with me for a moment. This isn't about being hyper-inclusive. This isn't about everyone having an opinion and that opinion being valid. Because if that was the case, well, it would be a crazy place. It sort of already is a little crazy. But calling people by numbers or masking people or locking people up when there's no harder, firmer science behind that, I'm not sure that's healthy for us. Happy to be told that I'm wrong. Happy to be told that locking people up in a small room, feeding them what they are fed, essentially, controlling their lives for a small period of time, 14 days, and some other countries are maybe 3 days or 7 days. There's no real rhyme or reason to this justification. I don't know if that's necessarily healthy. I know that can trigger a lot of old wounding. I know people that have experienced physical abuse of any form, whether it's sexual or violent abuse, even emotional abuse, can be very triggering to be locked up because they want to travel to see their family, to see their loved ones. We're social beings, we're relational beings. Biologically, our nervous systems need other people to grow and to learn, to feed off and from. That information that comes to us from our environment is fed through our enteric nervous system, feeds into our brain. We process that information. We determine safety, unsafety. We move into sympathetic or parasympathetic nervous system responses. When we isolate ourselves, when we feel controlled, restricted, constricted, that promotes more fear. Happy to be told that I'm wrong and that this is a really healthy practice for us. Maybe some are saying, well, let's be safe. Better be safe than sorry. Whew, it's a big call. Politicians are changing their minds every day, every week, every month. Slowly and more slowly and maybe quite rapidly, like, I don't know, the boiling frog syndrome. Laws are being passed that are restricting us more and more and forcing us to be a particular kind of way. I hear experts and scientists and physicians and medical practitioners talk eloquently and in quite a neutral way, but obviously with an agenda and a bias. And we all have an agenda. I have one, you have one, we all have one, we all have many. Speaking about the positive effects of becoming vaccinated. And then you have scientists and medical professionals speaking about the negative effects, the possible negative effects. And there's a confusion. And amidst that, which I find very interesting, is that the pharmaceutical companies that are producing, creating, testing, promoting these medicine's an interesting term because that implies that you're sick, and maybe by definition vaccines are not medicine. Check me on that. But these companies legally have no liability. That I find interesting. When a building is built, the architectural team, the construction team have liability. Something goes wrong in the building. Okay, interesting. A medical professional who conducts, call it reconstructive surgery or an operation, has liability. I, as a coach in the world, I carry liability if I'm working with someone. Car manufacturers have liabilities. Oil and gas companies have liability. It becomes their responsibility to clean up their mess if they fuck up. But interestingly enough, and you can do your research here, pharmaceutical companies don't have that liability. Now, I don't want to become tangential. I don't want to go down a tangent or down a rabbit hole. But that story really shook me up. I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop thinking about a striking resemblance to our history, to tyrannical rule, to oppressive governmental corporate behavior. It's interesting what laws New York and California are passing now as well, and what they're attempting to pass. As an example, a small example of many examples in the world. I mention them because it's in my own backyard. I live here in the US. What I do know is that this fear-mongering, because that's what it is causing a great deal of disharmony. It's activating people and all their old, amplified, unprocessed shit as well, their emotional baggage. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, by the way. pending they feel safe enough to work with their stuff, to deal with their stuff, to move through their stuff, to have support whilst they're moving through this old shit. And so I can see the benefit in having our emotional bodies activated to the point where shit, we're scared and old fears coming up, and now maybe it's time to work with this stuff. Because we are born free, so to speak, or we're meant to be free. Free to express, free to be, as long as we are not causing harm to others. And I get the argument that if you are choosing, because this is the rhetoric, if you're choosing to not be vaccinated, then you are causing harm to others. And there's a counter argument to that as well. Vaccine shedding and other issues with individuals that are becoming vaccinated for this particular virus, and that they then become these asymptomatic carriers, so to speak, or these carriers that are not really feeling the intensity of it, and then they're still moving around and making contact with people, and they become super spreaders, and who's a super spreader, and all this jargon, this rhetoric, this narrative that's permeating, these narratives that are permeating society, and yet we're still confused. But what we do know is that people are suffering. I'm not talking just about biologically, I'm not talking about physiologically. This is a real thing. People are hurting, people are dying. I get it. We're meant to die. We're meant to be sick. But we're meant to repair and heal. And if it's our time, it's our time. And we can do things to help us. And are those things that we're doing that we are being told to do, being recommended strongly, firmly to do, are they the quote-unquote right thing? What's the agenda behind that? And what I do know is that these people, all of us, I'm suffering at some level. Now, of course, I say that from, a roof over my head and food in my fridge. I'm very clear about that as well, just in case anyone starts throwing the privilege word around and this and that. And I'm not fucking interested in having an argument with people. And if you show up in that way, it's either going to be ignored or blocked, delete, as an FYI. But what I do see is people really hurting and angry and sad and feeling alone and isolated and scared to connect with other human beings. What mental health effect is that having on our population and on us as individuals, on our heart space? That story really shook me up. And if they're doing that in a developed nation, right, what's potentially next? That's just a question to ask. What is potentially next? We have an amazing opportunity here. We are in a dilemma, a global dilemma. We have an amazing opportunity to come together as a humanity to serve each other in a higher way, to elevate consciousness, not to restrict ourselves, not to constrict ourselves and promote more fear, not fear-mongering, but rather expanding consciousness, getting more curious about what is possible, asking, inquiring, what do we need as individuals? What do we really need right now? Beyond just the politicians wanting to get elected for another term, the world is literally fucking burning. We have mass tire yards burning rubber and toxins into the atmosphere. We have natural bushfires, forest fires raging in Europe at the moment, in parts of Europe. We have massive oil spills in different areas of our oceans. Our rainforests are being depleted. Our reefs are being destroyed. Our largest carbon sinks are dwindling. That means our quality of life will and can go down. And yes, Earth moves in natural life cycles. And as humans, with great power comes great responsibility. And we have a decent amount of power, more than we may actually know. We can destroy planets, FYI. Nuclear bombs. We can destroy planets. We can also create a better and a different life for ourselves. And I'm wondering if we're really seizing the opportunity to do that as a collective in the mainstream. Or are we just further going into distraction, numbing ourselves with adrenaline, with pornography, with food, with TV, with handouts from the government, with whatever it may be? Are we really taking ownership and responsibility for who we are? Are we stepping into our sovereignty? Are we saying, you know what? I'm going to do things differently this time. I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to move in fear. I'm going to trust myself. I'm going to get curious. I'm going to be a little more autonomous, take ownership for my thoughts, for my feelings. I'm going to start exploring my own consciousness. I'm going to make decisions from a more elevated place. I'm going to judge less, shame less, including myself. I'm going to love just a little more. I'm not sure we're doing that as a collective, but here's the interesting thing. As individuals, we can do that. And individuals fill the space of the collective. So my question to you is, are you living in fear? Or are you living in more openness and spaciousness? Because when we're curious, we're spacious and we're open within ourselves, within our own psychological paradigm. And when we're spacious and open, there's no real room for fear. There's nothing wrong with fear. But if we keep acting from and in fear, we are just going to perpetuate more of that energetic into the world. I just can't sit back and pretend what is happening at some level is ludicrous and is not as good as what we could be doing. It's not as elevated and expansive as what we could be doing. We're promoting fear in the world because we don't know. We are in uncertainty. And our relationship with uncertainty as individuals and as a collective, our current psychology, that relationship with uncertainty, it's dismal. It's not healthy. It's unhealthy. Our relationship with uncertainty is forcing us and pushing us towards more and more constriction until that becomes the norm. Tell me what norm you want. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to know what norm you would like. What reality paradigm world do you want to create for yourself? Because we are at an amazing time in human history. In history full stop. Outside of us as well. We have an opportunity, and I've said this before, to expand massively. To see beyond the clutter. Beyond the fear, beyond the constriction, the unknown and the uncertainty. We have an amazing opportunity to see ourselves for the first time as the divine beings that we are. Are we seizing that, truly seizing that? Are we treating ourselves and others with reverence and respect and with a sense of honor that we've never had before? I want to know that. I know I could be doing better. I know I could be. I know that my beliefs and my ideals at the beginning, they haven't really changed over the last couple of years at all. But how I was first interacted with these ideals was from a judgmental place. I would shame others, and I have to own that. And in turn, I was shaming parts of myself. The opportunity we have is to do more, to do better, to do different, to really step into our sovereignty, our possibility and our potentiality. My encouragement and invitation is that you just sit back, observe, and ask yourself, what life do you really want? And how are you contributing to the mass fear that is unraveling itself in society? It's a question I ask myself every day. Am I contributing to mass fear? Or am I serving a part of our humanity and our consciousness that is willing and ready and able to grow? And we're not always going to get it right, and that's okay. But can we be in the vision of that question and in the energy of that movement? That story really struck me, and it hurt me. And it's got me thinking at a deeper level. It really has. Power and blessings to you.